I mean, we've seen a lot of action in a very short period of time. This heads-up play certainly been filled with few lead changes, and both players really ready to get after it, Ollie.
Yeah, I mean, you remember at the top, you talked about how this could be an epic, protracted battle, given the depth of their stacks heads up. Granted, 40-minute levels, a little bit slower, but I was quick to point out that given the lion-hearted, courageous sort of gear that both of these guys have.
This episode of Weekly Poker Hand is going to feature poker coaching coach extraordinaire who gets in there in battles. It is Aram Zobian. He is playing heads up in a $10,000 buy-in tournament at the PokerGo Studio. Huge thanks to them for letting us use their footage. In this hand, his opponent opts to limp from the small blind with ace-7 offsuit, playing about 40-ish big blinds deep, which is perfectly fine and standard. You may want to raise, but limping's also fine. Over to Aram with 8-6 offsuit in the big blind. This is a hand that's going to check pretty much every time and see if it flops well.
You could see it coming down to a pretty short-lived heads-up match.
Nobody knitting sweaters out there.
All right.
I mean, this could be it. Shoot. Trips versus two pair with an ace kicker. Certainly feels like Punsri's being set up here to lose some more of his stack.
That it does. Trip eights against 8s and 7s with an ace. And Zobian's check raise. Approaching 3x. For Punsri, this is just funky stuff. Like, once you get check raised here, you have to be so wary of the possibility that you're up against an 8.
Aram flops trips. That's a good way to win heads-up battles. He goes for the check, which I think he should do with most of his range in the spot. And then the button makes a bet with the ace-7 offsuit. Perfectly fine, perfectly standard on 8-8-7. Ace-7's pretty good. And then Aram check raises, applies maximum pressure, and starts to load money into this pot, which I love. Whenever you flop trips, especially on a board that is somewhat coordinated, notice in this spot there are a bunch of straight draws, both open-ended and gut shot, that Aram could be check raising. You definitely want to check raise with a lot of your super nut hands as well, like the 8-6. He does go for the check raise. There is nothing his opponent's ace-7 can do except for call and try to get to the showdown on nice, clean runouts. So let's head to the turn.
Oftentimes we would think, well, they'll slow play, but the draw-heavy nature of that texture with the 7 and the 8, you got a lot of straight draw combos that could be in there heads up because the ranges are wider. You can't always just fear the monster under the bed, but when your opponent simply seems to have it with an almost 100% frequency, then that's when you need to.
Yeah, but it's almost like, can they always have it? You know, so
Sure.
far they've just been hitting nutted hands,
Yep.
and you're like, well, this doesn't seem probable.
Torch off your stack and I'll show you.
Zobian getting ever so tricky after the check raise, getting called. Checks now, and of course Punsri's going to want to value bet this. Certainly can find calls from worse 7s. I mean, is he going to go for the double check raise? That is a rare sight to behold, Ali. I mean, I haven't seen many in my days.
9-10. 9-10.
Fool me once.
Oh man, this is.
Like deep down when someone does this, like I'm just seething. Like, because I feel like I look stupid, and I'm also like, did I really let them just get away with the double?
You feel like you're getting your
check
face smeared in it a little bit.
Yeah.
It feels personal. It feels like unprofessional on your part.
raise? And I just wish that I was around in the good old days when you can't check raise people. You know, now I understand why that was a rule. It's just simply not allowed. I feel like.
The turn is a nice, innocuous 2 of spades. I presumed Aram would just keep betting on this turn because now he's going to have various flush draws that can very easily follow through. But he decides to get a little bit tricky, a little bit trappy, and protect his checking range by checking with this 8-6. And then ace-7 goes for a bet for half pot. which I think is perfectly fine and reasonable, especially if you think your opponent's going to keep betting with all of their 8s or most of their 8s on the turn. Because if they're going to keep betting with all their 8s on the turn, then ace-7's almost always good. So ace-7 does go for a bet, and then Aram decides to get after it again and go for the double check raise. As Maria Ho, the commentator here, says, it is very frustrating whenever you get double check raised. You're like, did this really just happen? Because now this ace-7 has shriveled up to become a bluff catcher. So the question is Aram the type of player who's going to go for the double check raise as a bluff? And look, if you've watched any of Aram's content at PokerCoaching.com, you know that he likes to play some massively exploitative poker when he thinks he can get away with it. Does he think he can get away with it here against a very strong opponent in a $10,000 buy-in tournament? I don't know. That's usually the time you don't really want to try to get too out of line. That said, maybe. I mean, if you gave me the ace-7 suited here on the button, or ace-7 offsuit here on the button, I would just call. I'd be annoyed about it, but I'd call and call down on safe rivers. I don't really see another good option unless you think Aram's going to be super straightforward and only be double check raising with an 8. But most people just don't do that. Aram does, though. He goes for the check raise, ace-7 calls, and we head off to the river.
That's rude.
Well, I don't disagree with you. As Punsri called the extra 590,000, still not a believer that Zobian has anything, given the way he's taken this line and given the fact that none of the straights came in. And the running deuces really do narrow Zobian's winner range.
Yeah, effective stack pot size now. What's Zobian gonna go for? If he was afraid of being outkicked with the trips, now gonna chop unless his opponent has 8-7. 10 seconds. Not just the one timing. Prepared to use the remainder for this decision.
Not the first time that he's done this, by the way, and a lot of times it does vibe authentic. Like, I truly have something to think about when we know that all Zobian's doing is trying to get all of his chips into the middle and get called in the process.
Aram rips it in. He's taking a pretty strong line here. He's check raised the flop. That's pretty strong. He's check raised the turn. That's really strong. And then he rips it all in on the river in a situation where I gotta presume Aram's range is gonna be mostly full houses and busted straight draws. So, keeping that in mind, with the ace-7, I wanna know what you would do. Would you call it off or would you fold? Don't be results oriented. Take a second, pause the video, and write what you would do in the comment section below with this ace-7 facing the double check raise plus all in on the river.
And he has Punsri covered as Punat's asking for a count. This line is just so fishy from time to time. You check raise me on the flop, you check raise me on the turn. It's hard to make trips.
Punsri has no time banks too, Ollie, for this very important decision. And
and he's going to make the call, and that's it, Maria.
Yeah. Yeah, play well. Huh?
You have ace queen in hand when I do that.
Ace-7 cannot find the fold. I certainly don't fault ace-7 for calling in this spot. And Aram Zobian wins the title and $207,000. Good job, good work. Aram's been on an absolute heater this year. He's been crushing the game, and I'm very, very happy for him and all the other poker coaching coaches who have been crushing it. If you want to learn more about heads-up poker, we actually have a video where 2 of the best heads-up players in the game, Jonathan Jaffe and Justin Saliba, discuss tons and tons and tons of heads-up strategy. We're going to put a link to that somewhere around here. I don't know where it's going to be. It's going to be somewhere around here. So make sure you check that out. That's going to be it for today for me. Good luck in your games. Have fun. And when you get heads up, I hope you flop a lot of trips. I'll talk to you next time.